Cameron Haynes ran a 2:39 marathon at 58 years old, which for anyone unfamiliar with marathon times is not just fast for 58, that is fast fast. That is your local 24-year-old running influencer just deleted Strava and took a pottery fast. And after that race, Sage Canaday reportedly filed a tip with USADA because of his concerns around Haynes's public discussion of using BPC 157, a peptide that is prohibited under the WADA prohibited list. And now the endurance world has entered one of its favorite emotional positions, fully clinched. Because this story has everything endurance athletes love to argue about: aging, fairness, drug testing, peptides, master rewards, influencer culture, and medical optimization. And of course, grown adults on the internet typing comments with the emotional regulation of a raccoon trapped inside of a GNC. But this video is not about dunking on Cameron Haynes. It is not about declaring Sage the sheriff of Morality Town. And it is definitely not about pretending the entire issue is simple, because it is not. That is the problem. People want these clean lines. They want one box labeled cheating and another box labeled health. They want one person to be the villain and one person to be the hero, and everyone else to clap while the algorithm gently milks the outrage like a dairy cow in compression socks. But aging athletes, medical interventions, peptides, hormone clinics, endurance competition, and fairness do not fit that neatly. So the real question is not just, did someone break a rule? The question matters, but that is for governing bodies to decide, and I am not a governing body. The bigger question should be around, when does personal health optimization become a competitive advantage that no longer belongs on the same starting line? If we care about the sport, and if we care about fairness, and if we care about what grit actually means, we have to talk about that. Because the future of endurance sport is not just about carbon shoes and better gels, it is peptides, testosterone clinics, recovery protocols, longevity medicine, blood markers, boutique doctors, $1,000 monthly optimization packages, and athletes insisting this is just for my health, while standing on the podium next to a guy whose entire recovery protocol is ibuprofen, Costco chicken, and a shoe with 600 miles on it. And I am probably going to be that guy. So that is not a clean playing field. That is a pharmaceutical escape room with race bibs. So here's the basic situation we have right now. Cameron Haynes, known for bow hunting, endurance training, lifting, running, and the whole keep hammering identity, ran the Eugene Marathon in 2:39:11 at 58 years old. That is an absurdly strong preference. And not to dunk on the guy again, I've read his book twice now. I actually really enjoy it. So he reportedly run his age group in the Masters division, and the race was also connected to the USATF championship competition, which matters because once you are dealing with a sanctioned competition, you are not just running a local turkey trot with first prize as a banana, a sticker, and a haunting realization you just paid $65 to jog near a dentist. You are entering a formal competitive structure. And when you enter that structure, there are rules. Not vibes, not, but he works hard, not, he inspires me. Rules. Sage Canaday reportedly raised concerns with USADA because Haynes had publicly discussed using BP7157. Now, to be very clear, reporting a concern is not the same as proving a violation. Social media speculation is not due process. Instagram court comments are not a courtroom. Although, given the tone of some of these threads, they are apparently where nuance goes to be beaten with a kettlebell. So, no, this is not a video declaring someone guilty. This is a video asking why this issue is going to keep happening. Because Haynes is not the beginning and end of this conversation. He is a visible example of a much bigger collision. On one side, you have modern health optimization culture. On the other hand, you have sport. And sport has rules because competition requires boundaries. Without boundaries, the starting line becomes less of a race and more of a biomedical arms fair where everyone is pretending the missiles are just for wellness. Now let's actually talk about the peptide here, BPC 157. BPC stands for Body Protection Compound. BPC 157 is a synthetic peptide made of about 15 amino acids. In wellness in performance circles, it is often marketed as a repair peptide. People will talk about tendons and ligaments, muscle injuries, bone healing, gut health, inflammation, joint pain, and recovery. Basically, it gets sold as this, maybe this will fix the thing your body keeps refusing to fix compound. And you can see why that would attract many athletes, especially aging athletes, injured athletes, people who are tired of hearing just rest from a medical system that sometimes treats active adults like the solution to every problem is becoming a decorative houseplant. If you are 50, 60, older, and your tendons feel like it was assembled by a hungover intern, the promise of something that might help tissue repair is extremely appealing. And that's the hook with this thing. But there's also the problem with the thing. This BPC 157 is not just some harmless recovery gummy shaped like a bear and blessed by a chiropractor. USDA says this thing is prohibited under the WADA prohibited list in this S0 category, non-approved substances. That category matters. S0 is not this substance definitely turns you into Captain America. S0 means it is not approved for human therapeutic use by a governmental regulatory health authority, and under anti doping rules, that alone can make it prohibited. In plain English, it does not need to be a classic steroid to be banned. It does not need to be testosterone or EPO. It does not need to be arrive in a black duffel bag while Russian techno plays in the background. If it is unapproved for human use and falls underneath the S0, it will be prohibited. And BPC 157 is specifically named in that category. And that is why this discussion cannot be hand waved away with it is just a peptide. That is like saying it's just a chemical. Water is a chemical. Caffeine is a chemical. Cyanide is a chemical. Look, peptide is a very broad category. Some peptides are naturally occurring, some are legitimate medicines, some are banned, some are experimental, some are sold through gray market websites that scream science while looking like they were built under during a gas leak. The question is peptide or not peptide. The question is this specific substance allowed under the rules of the event? And for BPC 157 in a WADA governated sport, the answer is no. But this is where we're going to start blurring some lines here. Because aging is real. Hormones change, recovery slows, tendons become less forgiving, sleep gets worse, muscle mass is harder to maintain. Injuries start acting like subscription services. You cancel them and somehow they keep billing you. So when an older athlete says, I'm using medical inventions to feel normal, that is not automatically ridiculous. There are real medical conditions. There are legitimate prescriptions. There are people trying to function, work, train, sleep, recover, stay alive without feeling like a haunted shed. I get that. Pain and fatigue and hormone dysfunction, injury and chronic symptoms, these things are not morality tests. But sport is not built around giving every person an equal biography. Sport cannot make everyone the same age and genetics and income and medical history, childhood, trauma, shoe budget, tendon durability, access to coaching, ability to sleep 8 hours without a toddler standing next to the bed like a Victorian ghost. And you all know the parent that does that. Sport does not promise equal lives. Sport promises equal rules. There's a difference there. And once medical intervention starts restoring or enhancing performance beyond what the rules allow, the conversation changes. Because now it is no longer, can this person feel better? It becomes, can this person compete against others while using something others are not allowed to use? That matters, especially when awards and records and rankings and qualifying spots and prize money and sponsorship influence or public claims are involved. If you are running on your own, training for your own mental health, rebuilding your body, trying to survive aging with dignity, that's one thing. You are participating in a public comparison, and public comparison requires rules. Otherwise, what are we doing? We are not racing, we're comparing medical access at that point. Culturally, BPC 157 feels gray. People hear about it all the time in podcasts, longevity clinics. They hear about it from athletes trying to heal injuries. They see it marketed for recovery, and they hear peptide and think, well, that sounds less scary than steroids. And honestly, peptide does sound friendlier, right? Steroids sounds like something that gets delivered in a duffel bag by a man named Victor. Peptide sounds like a tiny little helpful intern in your bloodstream wearing safety goggles. But the rule side is different. Under WADA, BPC 157 is not floating in some mystical fog of maybe, it is listed under non approved. And that's important. 157 was added to WADA in 2022. That means this is not some ancient anti doping rule written before the internet and carbon shoes or men using the word protocol to describe breakfast. It is a modern addition because these substances are showing up in wellness and anti aging spaces. And that's why this matters. Let's get into the problem here. Because older athletes are the exact population most likely to experience real medical decline and the exact population most likely to seek medical support like peptides. And that is the dilemma. A 58-year-old athlete might be dealing with low testosterone, injuries, poor recovery, inflammation, sleep issues, tendon problems, or chronic pain. Some will seek care from regular physicians, longevity clinics, hormone clinics, legitimate diagnoses, and some will get sold a shopping cart of injections, creams, powders, and monthly lab panels so expensive they should come with a timeshare presentation, and then some of these athletes will race. So, where is this line we have to draw? Because if someone uses a medically approved treatment for a diagnosed condition, is that healthcare? Potentially. But if that treatment is prohibited in sport without a valid exemption, can they take competitive awards? And that collision is not going to go away. Because then we start dealing with the money problem. Because money already affects sport. Better shoes help, better coaching helps, altitude camps help, recovery tools help, nutrition support helps, blood testing helps, massage, physical therapy, strength programming, sleep optimization, lactate testing, metabolic testing, custom orthotics, carbon plated shoes, continuous glucose monitors, and a refrigerator full of supplements help. And there are some people out there that have all that. And there's going to be some people out there that have none of that. Sport has never been perfectly equal. Let's not pretend the starting line is some sacred democratic meadow where everyone arrives with the same resources and a pure heart. Some athletes show up with a full support team. Some show up after working a night shift and eating gas station Brio that now qualifies as an internal adversary. But there is a reason we still draw these lines, because unfairness exists on a spectrum. Having better shoes is not the same thing as using a banned substance. Having a coach is not the same as using a prohibited compound marketed for tissue repair. Having access to physical therapy is not the same as using an experimental peptide that allows other athletes are not allowed to use. But modern wellness culture is starting to blur that middle. What about legal but expensive recovery tools? What about off label prescriptions? What about hormone optimization? What about gray market compounds? What about interventions that are only available to people spending thousands per month? And that is where this debate about certain peptides starts to get hard because not every unfair advantage is illegal, and not every legal advantage feels fair. That is an ugly truth. Sport already tolerates financial inequality up to a point, but when financial inequality buys biological manipulation, the conversation changes. Because now the athlete's not just buying better equipment, they are maybe buying better adaptation. And that strikes directly at what training is supposed to measure. Now, one defense that always appears in all these debates is, well, everyone else is doing it. First, no, they're not. Second, even if many people are doing it, that does not magically turn it into fairness. That is not ethics. That is just peer pressure wearing compression sleeves. And if enough people are cut a course, do we not say, well, congratulations, the marathon is now 24 miles. We're looking at you, LA Marathon. Rules do not disappear because enforcement is imperfect. Now, there is a legitimate argument that anti doping is in recreational master sports is inconsistent. Testing is limited. Many races are not testing anyone. Plenty of athletes may be using substances quietly, and if you only catch allowing people, enforcement can feel uneven. That's an issue. That's a real issue. But uneven enforcement is not an argument for no standards. It is an argument for clearer standards. If race directors offer masters awards, championship titles, records, and rankings, athletes need to know what rules apply, and athletes need to take responsibility for what they put in their body. That is not some crazy anti-doping extremist position. That's just a basic deal of regulated sport. And speaking of the training aspect and how we measure training, this is kind of where we kind of get wrapped up in things like hard work and discipline and suffering and grinding and hammering and no excuses. And look, I believe in hard work and discipline. I believe in chosen discomfort. I believe the body and mind adapt when exposed to structured stress. That's basically the entire operating system behind everything I do and the books I write. But grit is not using every possible advantage and then pretending the result came only from willpower. Grit is not turning yourself into a walking clinical trial and then giving a speech about discipline like your endocrine system did not have a co-author credit. Grit is not escaping constraints while selling the aesthetic of overcoming them. Real grit is operating honestly inside your constraints. Age is a constraint. Pain is a constraint. Health, rules, they're all constraints. And adaptation means you work within the constraints in front of you. You do not have to like them. You do not have to romanticize them. You definitely do not have to make a motivational poster where your knee pain whispers ancient wisdom while an ego cries in the background. But you do have to respect the difference between adaptation and circumvention. That is the line. Using training, recovery, nutrition, sleep, intelligent programming, and legitimate medical literature to stay functional? Good. Using prohibited enhancement and still claiming the same competitive ground? That's different. And again, this does not mean every medical intervention is cheating. It means the sport has to define what kind of intervention changes the comparison. Because competition is comparison. That's the point. If a comparison becomes meaningless, the war becomes theater, and masters athletes deserve better than theater. They deserve categories that mean something. So, amongst all this, where do I draw the line? Here is my view. If you are using a substance that is prohibited underneath the rules of events, you should not be eligible for awards, records, podiums, championships, placements, or age group recognition unless you have gone through whatever exemption process applies. You can still run. You can still challenge yourself. You can still chase personal meaning. You can still be part of the community if you're taking things like this. But you do not get to take competitive recognition from people playing underneath the stated rules. That is the cleanest standard. It's not perfect, but it's workable. Because the alternative is just chaos and anarchy. No one really wants anarchy in the middle of a race. The alternative is every athlete becoming their own governing body. Well, my doctor says it's fine. My clinic says it's wellness. My podcast sponsor says it's ancient. My blood work says I'm now optimized. My vibes say WADA is negative energy. No, that cannot be your standard. The standard has to be external. That's why rules exist. Now, do the rules need to evolve? Absolutely. The optimization industry is moving fast. Aging athletes are increasing. Longevity medicine is expanding. The line between treatment and enhancement will get harder to manage. Governing bodies need better education, clearer race policies, and more realistic guidance for recreational and masters athletes. Maybe some events eventually need to separate enhanced categories. Maybe some races need clearer award eligibility languages. Maybe masters athletes need better education on common prescriptions, peptides, hormone therapies, and anti-doping rules. Maybe we need to stop pretending this is only an elite problem because it is not. It is calming up for local races, age rewards, ultra marathons, CrossFit style competitions. Every sport where aging athletes, money, medicine, and public recognition collide. If we do not talk about it now, we will talk about it later after everyone is angry, more confused, and somehow sponsored by a peptide clinic called Prime Mammal Labs. Look, the starting line is symbolic. It says we are all here underneath the same rules. Not the same life or genetics or bank account or injury history, the same rules. That's what makes competition meaningful. And the moment we lose that, we lose something important because sport is not just about who crosses the line first, it's about what the result means. A master's award means something because we assume the athletes of that category are competing underneath a shared standard. A personal best means something because we know what we went to it. A record means something because it is not supposed to be a marketing claim wearing a bib number. And yes, aging sucks. Pain sucks. Decline sucks. Watching your body lose abilities you spent decades building is brutal. I understand why people look for help. I've looked for help. I understand why medical optimization is appealing. But sport cannot solve aging by quietly allowing biological enhancement into every category while pretending nothing changed. That is not comparison. That is denial with a race clock. The better path is honesty. If you need medical treatment, get treatment. If you want to compete, know the rules. If the rules are outdated, debate them. If a substance is prohibited, do not take awards while using it unless you have a valid exemption. If you want to run for yourself, run for yourself. But do not confuse personal inspiration with competitive awareness. Those are different games. So this story is not really about one marathon or even just one guy. It's about the future of performance. It's about what happens when healthcare, optimization culture, influencer identity, aging, and competitive sport all crash into each other like a group ride with no brakes. And we need better conversations than cheater versus hater, because that's too easy. The real issue is heart. How do we support aging athletes without turning master sports into pharmaceutical bidding war? How do we respect medical needs without erasing competitive standards? How do we celebrate hard work without ignoring biological assistance? How do we keep the starting line as fair as possible in a world where money can increasingly buy recovery, hormones, biomarkers, peptides, and maybe even adaptation itself? Those questions matter. Because grit should mean something, or at least it should. Grit is not just suffering loudly. It's not just grinding until your body becomes a haunted appliance. It's not just every possible intervention and then pretending the only ingredient was discipline. Grit is facing constraints honestly, pain, aging, rules, and then adapting inside reality. That is my core idea behind Forged in Pain. Pain, limitation, decline are not moral failures. But what we do with them matters. Some pain is information, some of it's adaptation, some of it is teaching you. But if we remove constraints and still claim the lesson, we are not proving grit. We are just editing the test and bragging about the grade. So, yes, let aging athletes fight decline. Let people seek health. Let people use medicine when they need medicine. But when we line up to compete, when awards are on the table, when records and rankings and public claims are involved, we owe each other something better than vibes. We owe each other a fair line. Not a perfect line, perfect does not exist, but a line clear enough that a person who can barely afford shoes is not unknowingly racing against someone whose recovery plan costs more than a mortgage, comes with a lab coat, a syringe, and a podcast discount code. That's the conversation. Not outrage, not hero worship, not internet trial by comment section. A real conversation about fairness, aging, medicine, competition, and what actually means to keep hammering when the rules still matter.